Welcome to the Deep Dive Podcast channel. Today we're exploring something really profound, maybe even a bit elusive. We're talking about invisible wounds, the kind of scars left not by bad things that happened, but by what didn't happen. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How can an absence, a lack of something, leave such deep and lasting marks on us? We're going to dig into how emotional neglect in childhood can subtly, almost silently, shape our adult lives, our relationships, even who we think we are.
It's such a critical area, really. We often focus on overt harm, which is vital, of course, but the impact of consistently unmet emotional needs during childhood, well, it's significant. It's a pervasive kind of developmental disruption. And honestly, it's much more common than people tend to think. Understanding it, really getting it, can unlock so much about why we feel and act the way we do.
Okay, so these invisible wounds, as you put it. Psychologically speaking, what are we actually defining here? What is childhood emotional neglect, or CEN?
Right. So CEN at its heart is about a consistent failure by caregivers to adequately respond to a child's emotional needs. Think about what kids need emotionally: affection, validation, guidance, just feeling seen and understood, basic presence. When these aren't reliably there, that's neglect. And crucially, it's often not about parents being intentionally cruel. It's frequently an omission. Maybe the parents were overwhelmed, dealing with their own stuff, maybe stressed or just emotionally limited themselves, unaware even. The real core issue is often a lack of what we call attunement, that ability of a parent to tune into the child's feelings, understand them, help the child make sense of them. When that's missing consistently, the child gets this implicit message deep down: my feelings don't matter, they're irrelevant, maybe even bad.
That makes a lot of sense. And what kinds of family environments tend to, inadvertently create this space for neglect? Where does it often show up?
Oh, it shows up in various ways. You might see families where parents are just focused on survival, maybe dealing with their own trauma history or addiction or just grinding away at work. Emotional connection just isn't prioritized, or they lack the bandwidth for it. Or you could have caregivers who are perhaps emotionally immature themselves, maybe narcissistic, unable to really see the child's inner world. Then there are those seen but not heard kind of households, or very rigid authoritarian families where expressing feelings is discouraged, even punished. In all these settings, children learn to shrink themselves emotionally, disconnect from their needs, hide vulnerability. It becomes a survival strategy.
And that strategy, that survival mechanism, it doesn't just disappear, does it? It carries right into adulthood, creating these subtle but really persistent effects. One that really stands out is this idea of developing a false self. Can you talk about that, it sounds like? Well, living as an emotional ghost.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, the authentic emotional self kind of goes underground because it wasn't seen or validated. So the person constructs a persona, this false self, designed to navigate the world, meet expectations, get by, without revealing those buried true feelings.
What might that look like on the outside?
Well, you might see someone who's incredibly high-achieving, ticking all the boxes, but feels profoundly empty inside. Or maybe someone who's incredibly kind, always accommodating, but has virtually no boundaries. They might seem fiercely independent, I don't need anyone, but secretly, desperately crave connection.
And alongside that, you often see this deep chronic shame.
Absolutely. That lack of emotional mirroring in childhood, it often leads to this core belief forming: there must be something wrong with me, because why else would my feelings be ignored or dismissed, right? And that belief festers. It turns into this persistent shame and often a really harsh inner critic.
That voice inside that's always finding fault.
Exactly. It undermines confidence, attacks self-worth, and just kind of steals the joy out of things. It's convinced you're flawed because your inner world wasn't validated.
It's a heavy thing to carry. And it connects to another struggle I see: difficulty with even naming or expressing emotions, like lacking a language for your own inner world.
Precisely. It's not apathy, not at all. It's that the emotional education was missing. They never learned how to articulate what's going on inside. Imagine trying to describe colors if you'd never been taught the words red or blue. It's similar for feelings.
So how does it come out then?
It might manifest physically, that knot in the stomach, tension in the shoulders, just vague bodily sensations. Or it might leak out indirectly through sarcasm, maybe, or withdrawal, or sometimes over-intellectualizing, talking about feelings instead of feeling them.
As we're exploring these patterns, which it can be quite subtle but so impactful, we really want to encourage you, our listeners, to just notice what resonates. Maybe something clicks about your own experience or someone you know. If this conversation is sparking something for you, please do consider subscribing to the Deep Dive Podcast channel. And maybe leave us a comment or review. Your engagement truly helps us share more conversations like this.
Yeah, that feedback is great. And building on those internal effects, the relational impact is just massive. Think about attachment. Neglect really distorts how we learn to connect. So adults with a CEN background often find themselves in this paradox. They crave intimacy deeply, but it also feels incredibly threatening or overwhelming.
Why is that?
Because closeness itself can trigger feelings of being exposed or confused or unsafe. Safety within intimacy, that feeling of being held emotionally, it just wasn't modeled. So connection feels risky.
Which ties right into what you mentioned earlier about boundaries, doesn't it? The people-pleasing tendency.
Exactly. If your emotional or physical space wasn't respected as a child, if your no didn't matter, setting boundaries as an adult feels incredibly difficult, almost alien. Self-worth can get tangled up in being liked, being needed, being useful. Saying yes even when it hurts you becomes automatic. Prioritizing others feels normal, even necessary.
And the irony there is profound.
It really is, because even when surrounded by people, maybe even in a long-term relationship, many CEN survivors feel profoundly alone.
Still isolated.
Deeply isolated. There's this fear often of being a burden if they show their true needs or feelings, or just the habit of hiding is so ingrained so they keep parts of themselves hidden, which of course prevents real connection and reinforces that feeling of being alone.
It sounds like a very lonely experience, even when not physically alone. And this internal state, this quietness, can it look like depression? Maybe that high-functioning kind we hear about.
Yes, very much so. High-functioning depression, or sometimes just a pervasive emotional numbness. These are people who often look like they have it all together on the outside. Successful careers, organized lives seem perfectly fine, but internally, there's this persistent ache, a hollowness, a lack of vitality.
It's not laziness, is it?
Not at all. It's a defense. It's the residue of a lifetime of learning that your inner world doesn't matter or isn't safe to show. It's an internal shutdown, in a way.
And asking for help, that must be incredibly hard too.
Extremely hard. There's often immense guilt or shame tied to needing anything from anyone. The internal monologue is often, I should be able to handle this myself. Don't bother anyone.
Which mirrors the original neglect.
Precisely. It mirrors that experience where needs weren't met, so the lesson learned was don't have needs, or at least don't show them.
This is making me think about something else. Self-sabotage. Can CEN lead to actually undermining your own success or happiness?
It absolutely can. It sounds counterintuitive, but receiving good things, praise, affection, success, genuine connection can feel deeply uncomfortable, even threatening.
Why?
Because it's unfamiliar territory. It might trigger imposter syndrome, I don't deserve this, or just a general sense of unease because positive attention or closeness feels exposing. So subconsciously, a person might push it away, sabotage the good thing, to return to a more familiar, albeit painful, state. It's a strange kind of protective mechanism.
Wow. Okay, let's shift perspective slightly. You mentioned earlier this is a form of developmental disruption.
Yeah.
Let's talk about CEN through the lens of trauma. Why is it considered trauma?
That's a really important clarification. We often think of trauma as resulting from bad things happening, abuse, accidents, violence, and that's true. That's commission trauma. But neglect is about the absence of good things, the lack of necessary nurturing experiences. And that absence, that deprivation, is also deeply traumatizing to a developing system.
So it's not just less bad than abuse.
No, it's different, but equally impactful in terms of creating developmental rupture. Trauma isn't just the event, it's how our system processes overwhelming experiences, especially when we lack support. With neglect, the trauma is in the unseen, unsupported pain of unmet needs. And we know now, biologically, that long-term emotional deprivation actually changes brain development. Areas like the amygdala, involved in fear processing, the prefrontal cortex, for emotional regulation, the insula, for self-awareness, their development is impacted.
So it literally wires you differently.
It does. It can make it genuinely harder to process emotions, to feel safe in relationships, to even know what you're feeling. It's not just in your head.
And the body remembers this, right? People often talk about physical symptoms.
Absolutely. The body keeps the score, as the saying goes. Chronic fatigue, muscle tension that never seems to go away, digestive problems, migraines, autoimmune issues, unexplained pain. These can all be the body's way of holding on to that history of unmet needs, that chronic stress state. It's the physical archive of that emotional silence.
Okay, so if this is trauma, how do we approach healing? What are the principles of trauma-informed healing in this context?
The foundation is always safety. Creating both internal safety, feeling safer within your own skin, and relational safety, that comes first. Then there's empowerment. helping someone reclaim their voice, their agency, the sense that their feelings and needs do matter. Trustworthiness is key. Healing often happens in reliable relationships where trust can be rebuilt. And very importantly, choice and collaboration. Healing isn't linear, it has to be self-paced. The person needs to feel in control of their own recovery journey.
That makes sense. I've also heard about the idea of reparenting the inner child as part of this. What does that involve?
It's a powerful concept. Essentially, the adult self learns to provide the emotional care that was missing in childhood. It means learning to talk to yourself with kindness, especially when you're struggling. It means validating your own feelings, saying it's okay to feel sad or it's understandable you're angry without judgment. And consciously trying to meet those needs that were neglected, maybe for rest or playfulness or just gentle attention.
It's not about becoming childish then.
Not at all. It's about integration. It's about acknowledging those younger parts of you that are still carrying the pain and offering them the understanding and care they never received from your adult self, bringing them into the present with compassion.
And alongside that, there's the work of actually learning the language of emotions.
Yes, building emotional literacy and self-attunement. This is fundamental. It involves learning to name feelings, moving beyond just good or bad or fine. It means paying attention to your body. Where do you feel sadness? What does anxiety feel like physically? Tracking triggers, noticing patterns, and then gradually practicing emotional honesty, sharing what you're really feeling, even if it's just a little bit, in safe relationships, allowing yourself to be truly seen.
Okay, this is all incredibly insightful. How can people start putting this into practice? What are some concrete steps towards recovery?
Well, one very accessible tool is journaling. It's a fantastic way to start building that connection with your inner self. Writing can help awaken that dormant emotional part and build your capacity to reflect. You could try prompts like, what am I feeling right now in this moment and maybe why? Or explore things like, what did I need as a child that I didn't get? Or even, what does safety feel like in my body? When have I felt it? Simple questions can unlock a lot.
And boundaries. We talked about those earlier. That seems like a huge area for practice.
Huge. And it's about reframing boundaries. They aren't walls to keep people out. They're definitions of self-respect. They communicate what's okay with you and what's not. It's about reclaiming that agency. You can start small. Practice saying, let me think about that, instead of an immediate yes. Notice your body's signals. Does your stomach clench when you agree to something? Listen to that. And keep reminding yourself internally, my needs are valid. It's okay to protect my energy.
That feels really empowering. And what about relationships, if connection is part of the wound?
It's also the medicine, but it has to be the right kind of connection. Seek out and cultivate safe relationships. What does that mean? Relationships where there's empathy, where your vulnerability is treated with care, not judgment or dismissal, where there's mutual respect, not performing to be liked.
And vulnerability itself.
It's a skill you build. It's not about oversharing everything immediately. It's about gradually revealing more of your true self with people who've earned your trust and seeing that it can be safe. It grows with practice, with consistency, with kindness, both from others and towards yourself.
But sometimes self-help and supportive friends aren't quite enough, right? When should someone consider professional help?
Absolutely. If these patterns feel deeply entrenched, if they're significantly impacting your life, your relationships, your well-being, therapy can be incredibly beneficial. Think of therapy as providing that safe, consistent, relational mirror, a space specifically designed to help you process those old wounds, untangle those distorted beliefs about yourself, and practice new, healthier ways of relating and communicating. It's a dedicated space to finally be seen and understood.
Are there particular types of therapy that are especially helpful for CEN?
Yes, definitely look for trauma-informed therapists. Specific modalities that often work well include internal family systems or IFS, that model of seeing our psyche as having different parts. Somatic experiencing is excellent for addressing the physical, embodied aspects of trauma. Compassion-focused therapy is also wonderful for building that inner kindness and self-acceptance. Even some forms of trauma-informed CBT can be adapted effectively. The key is finding someone who understands developmental trauma and neglect.
Great. Okay, let's tackle a few frequently asked questions that often come up around CEN. We'll do a quick round. First one, is emotional neglect always intentional?
No. As we said, it's very often unintentional. It usually stems from the caregiver's own limitations, issues, or lack of awareness. But the impact on the child is profound, regardless of intent.
Okay. Can someone heal from CEN without therapy?
Some progress is definitely possible through self-work, reading, journaling, self-compassion practices. These can help significantly. However, therapy often provides the structure, guidance, and relational safety needed to really deepen the healing and address those core wounds more effectively. It tends to accelerate the process.
What are some common signs that someone might have experienced emotional neglect as a child?
Well, things like chronic self-doubt, feeling emotionally numb or empty a lot of the time, finding it really hard to trust people, difficulty asking for help, or even knowing what you need, maybe feeling like there's something fundamentally wrong with you.
Right. And is emotional neglect actually a form of trauma?
Yes, emphatically yes. It's a form of developmental trauma. The lack of essential emotional input impacts brain development and has long-lasting psychological and often physical consequences.
What kind of therapy is generally considered best for healing it?
Again, trauma-informed approaches are key. Things like IFS, somatic experiencing, compassion-focused therapy, trauma-informed CBT, models focusing on reparenting the inner child, these tend to be most effective.
And last one. Can emotional neglect affect your physical health?
Absolutely. The chronic stress associated with it can disrupt the nervous system, impact the immune system, lead to chronic fatigue, muscle tension, digestive issues, headaches, and various psychosomatic symptoms. The mind and body are deeply connected.
Thank you. That clarifies a lot. So as we wrap up this deep dive, the main takeaway seems to be that the silence of emotional neglect doesn't just stay in the past. It echoes through our lives. In every need we suppress, every tear we swallow, every time we tell ourselves our feelings aren't a big deal. But the crucial truth, the one to hold on to, is this. You matter. Your feelings matter. Your story matters.
Exactly. And healing isn't about assigning blame or dwelling endlessly on the past. It's really about courageously choosing to rewrite your future. One boundary at a time, one feeling acknowledged, one moment of connecting with yourself. It's a path of rediscovery, coming home to who you really are.
You were never too much. You were just unseen. But now the seeing can begin, and it starts with you. What will you choose to see, maybe kindly, in yourself today? Thank you so much for joining us for this important conversation. We hope you'll continue your own deep dive into self-awareness and healing. We'll catch you on the next one.